What we're now going to ask folks to do is taking everything that we've done in day one and day two and come up with solutions. Typically in a software product, we call them features. And this is where we get an opportunity to brainstorm based on our outcomes from day one and day two. What are the features that would best deliver value to address the opportunities and the problems that we've identified? And so we take our time with this. And so we go to it. And you can see on the screen here, this is an example of a roundup of unprioritized features that the team has generated. And there's a lot of them. You know, they're thinking about things.
You have to have a lot of stickies in the room if it's not virtual.
That's right. So we do this exercise where we ask everyone to write their idea on a single sticky. And then Makoto and I, or whoever's facilitating and I, will ask them to take a break. And then we'll, what we call affinity map, which is taking all of the different ideas and grouping them by theme. And so on the screen, you can see that the large green stickies are just categories that these features fit under. And the reason we do that is just so that we can, it makes it easier to chunk all of this great stuff that's on the wall into buckets where the mind can kind of, perceive them so that they're not overloaded. So then the next question we pose to folks is, okay, now we have to prioritize. We can't do all of this. But now we can start to set some priorities in terms of, again, going back to the goals we set for the business, the outcomes rather, and the customer outcomes as well. And so knowing those two things, the first question we ask is about value. Which of these features do you think deliver the most value based on what we know about the customer and what we know about the business and what those common outcomes are? Depending on how many stickies we have, they go to work on that. We let the voting happen. This is not necessarily a democratic process. This is a process whereby a group of experts and decision makers are in a room, and what they are doing is they are there to give their boss, whom we will call the decider, input so that the decider can make a decision about what we're going to do. And this is where some interesting things happen. The decider looks at the feature roundup and says, I see this one feature has, 6 dots on it, the most of any in the collection. But I'm looking at it and I don't necessarily agree that is the most important thing the most valuable thing, I should say, that we should build. And so they may say, well, I think this other area that only got 2 dots is more valuable. And so that might be a little controversial. They're going to put their dot there instead of the one that had 6 dots. And that's going to prompt a question from the facilitators as to why are you disagreeing with your team? It forces them to articulate their decision in front of the team. You might think that's demotivating, and it's absolutely the opposite because it forces communication. Part of the benefit of doing this work is fostering communication. And we can always assume people communicate well, but they don't. And so it really it actually helps morale because it says, I heard what you said and I'm going to disagree with you. And here's why I'm going to disagree. So anyway, we did this values voting, right? And now we're going to say, okay, now we've identified the most valuable features, but that's not enough because even though we may say this something here that we looked at is valuable from customer behavior change and business outcomes, desired outcomes, executing some of these things or implementing some of these things, some of them are riskier than others. And what I mean by risk is if we implement it and we ship it and the customer hates it, how bad is that for the business?
Yeah, and this is really risky around to develop and integrate this is when we mean risk.
Yeah, I can't tell you the number of times I've seen companies build something that they hadn't really proven whether the customer would dig it or not. And then that whole division gets gutted because the company, put a lot of assurance that the feature or the solution would be embraced by customers, and then it wasn't.
Yeah, and it's not just the loss of resourcing and cost, but it's the loss of potential revenue where you could have directed something elsewhere or gone to market sooner, but now your competitors have something else, and now you have to go back to the drawing board. So the opportunity cost lost is huge.